We're back reviewing college recruiting situations. I'm going to read through some of the situations sent in by parents, and then I'm going to tell you what I would do if I was in their situation, basically advise you through the process. So let's dive into the first one. First one comes in from Shauna. I hope I'm saying that right. Her daughter is a 2026 women's ice hockey goalie. They've had back and forth with about 25 schools, all D3. They've contacted 90% of schools that offer women's ice hockey. So I went through and checked that. It looks like it's about 141. 90% of that would be 126 schools. So we're just going to say for now that they've contacted about 126 schools. They have over 100 videos, short clips, highlight videos, and some full games. Their goal is D1, but they don't have any interest there yet. They only have D3 interest. And so her question is it really her height that is keeping her from hearing from the Division I coaches? We started using some of your techniques, and it seems to be working. We had our first Division I reply today. All of her coaches say she should be playing Division I, but no one seems to have the connections to get her the looks. Every recruiter we have spoken to says that she is too short to play Division I, and they can't help us. One said they could help us with the process if we were not interested in any SCAC or D1. It is awful. So here's what I would say to Shanna, sorry, one of those two. A couple things that stick out to me. The first one is that they have quite a bit of interest. They're talking to 25 schools, right? Now, even though they're all D3, 25 is a pretty big number, right? In my experience, anyone who's talking to more than 20 schools, that's where it gets to be a little bit overwhelming to manage because you have to actually build those relationships with coaches, and that requires effort and activity. And so that can be quite a bit of interest. So they're doing some really good things, and you can see how they got those 25 schools. They contacted 126 schools. And I typically recommend that you contact at least 100. They did more than that, and they're now reaping the benefits of that. So that is a beautiful thing. I also love what they have going on with video. Now, I've never seen the videos, but I can already tell you that it's probably pretty solid. Why? Because they have over 100 videos and multiple different kinds of videos. They have short videos and long videos. Real quick, one thing about video quantity, we went through all the athletes that are in our program, the families that are in our program, and we basically said, great, of these families, right, the ones that have the best results, what are they doing that everyone else isn't doing? And one of the things that stood out was the amount of video that they had. So the average family had 44 short clips on a YouTube channel. The ones that were talking to a minimum of 20 schools averaged 108 videos on the YouTube channel, more than twice as many. And you can see this family is right around that number, right? Over 100 videos. And so that just seems to be a recurring theme. The more videos someone has, the easier it tends to be for them to get interest. And so I love what they have going on here because they have short clips and highlight videos. A lot of people hear me talk about short clips and how you should mostly have short clips. That doesn't mean there's no place for highlight videos. It just means I don't want highlight videos to be the only kind of video that you have. The other thing is in regards to the full games, I think this is fantastic. There's a couple sports where you want full game videos because coaches want to see that. And so hockey would be one. Another example would be soccer. There's a lot of off-ball movement that happens in soccer. And so often coaches, once they've established that a kid is good and they already know that, they will then ask for full game videos so that they can see what the kid looks like in flow of the game. Are they in the rhythm of the game? Right? What do they look like when they don't have the ball? And so I think it's fantastic that they have some full games as well. In my opinion, without seeing the video, it looks like they're crushing it. Okay. And so the real question that they have here is her height keeping her from hearing from Division I coaches? My answer is possibly. Okay. So there is some level of height that coaches are going to be looking for specific positions in specific sports. Okay. Another example of this would be football. If your kid plays O-line and your kid is 6'1", you're going to have a really hard time getting interest, right? And that has nothing to do with your kid's skill. It's just unfortunately about size. And so for goalie, for hockey, that can be a thing. And so it is unfortunate, but it also doesn't mean that it's not possible. And that is my biggest thing that I want to say to you is no one's opinion matters besides college coaches. So the fact that your coaches think that she's a Division I player doesn't matter. But also the fact that some of the recruiters you've talked to have said that she can't play D1 because of her height, their opinion also doesn't matter. The only opinion that matters is that of college coaches. My opinion doesn't matter. Nobody's does, because the reality is every single D1 school could say, she's too small, she's not a good fit for our program. If one of them comes through and gives her an offer and she accepts that offer, she's a D1 player. It only takes one fish to bite. And this reminds me a lot of a situation. There was a woman that I talked to probably about a year ago, and she was telling me about her kid, and she was kind of downplaying him, saying that like he wasn't really that good. And I was kind of confused about it. And so I said, hey, you know what? I just don't think it's a great fit. Like, I don't think it's worth your money to come work with us when you say that your kid is not that good. And she said, you know what, Jack, I respectfully disagree. I would like to join the program. And I said, are you sure? Like, and so we set some clear expectations, but you know what happened? That kid ended up getting 3 offers and went on to play in college. And I was totally wrong. And I almost pushed away that family and didn't give them the opportunity to work with us because I jumped the gun on that and I was totally wrong. And so it just goes to show nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody knows what a kid is capable of. And so when you say, hey, is her height going to be the thing that keeps her from D1? I don't know. And if it's me, I just want to put her in front of as many D1 schools as I possibly could and let them make that call. That's all that you can really do. So I wouldn't just trust your travel or club coaches. I wouldn't trust these other recruiters. I would just say, can we put her in front of as many D1 schools as we possibly can? And then let them make the decision. And it sounds like you're already on the right track. You say, hey, we started doing some of the things you've been saying, and we got our first D1 reply. I would do more of that. I would go contact more D1 schools. I'd contact them more times. Like, I would really push that hard because it is entirely possible that even if your kid is undersized, that they still take her. But nobody's opinion matters besides college coaches. So Shauna, I wish you the best of luck. Harry. Okay, so Harry has a 2025 football player. He's an offensive lineman, a tight end, fullback, a defensive end. He's had back and forth with 5 schools. All of them are D3. Says he's contacted 40 schools. He has 3 videos, and the goal is D2 or D1. And his question is, are we too late in the process? So a couple things that I see here. All right. So let's address the question first. Are we too late in the process? For D2 or D1, you're not too late in the process, but it's going to be significantly harder than it would have been 6 or 12 months ago. Right. So when you think about, are we too late in the process? There is not a hard stop deadline date besides maybe like the first day of school. It's on a spectrum. It's not, are you too late? It's how late are you? And the later that you go, the harder it gets, especially to get top level interest, D1, D2 interest. Okay. So is it too late for D2, D1? No. Is it harder than it would have been 6 months ago, 12 months ago? Absolutely. Okay. Now, a couple other things that I want to point out about this. The first is that you have some back and forth with 5 schools. So there's obviously a little bit of talent here. Now, I'm really curious how big the player is because you say 4 different positions. And so offensive line, tight end, fullback, and DN, those could be wildly different sizes and skills, talents, traits, right? Those are very, very different. So one thing that I would urge you to do is pick the position or 2 that you think he is most likely to play at the next level. Because what happens is when you list multiple positions like that, you are kind of saying he's a jack of all trades, master of none. Because the reality is there are so few players who could play all 4 of those positions at an incredible level, right? And a college coach is thinking the same thing. They want to know, great, but like of those 4, like which one should I seriously be recruiting you for? Because it's probably not all 4. And so you're making them make a decision, and it's challenging. I think what a lot of families think is that a coach is going to see those 4, and then they're going to say, well, we don't need an offensive lineman or a tight end, but we need a DN. So I'm going to recruit him for DN. That's not necessarily how college coaches think. They think, well, if he was a DN and that was his main position, wouldn't that be what he's marketing himself as? And so I think that you might actually be hurting yourself by saying all 4 positions. I get it. High school coaches put great athletes in multiple positions. That happens in every sport. It's usually an indicator of good athleticism. That's great. But in terms of playing at the next level, you need to make it easy for coaches to know, what am I really recruiting you for? Right. And so I would say pick the 1 or 2 that you are most likely, or your kid is most likely to play at the next level. Let's also talk about this in terms of video. So you say you have 3 videos. That leads me to believe that those are probably longer videos, right? You probably don't have 3 10-second clips. You probably have 3 videos that are 3 to 5 minutes long, something like that, right? Which means that those 4 positions are hodgepodge buried somewhere in those videos, and it's going to be challenging for coaches to find the video of the position that they're looking for. I think you're probably just making it too hard for coaches to one, recruit the player and know what they are recruiting them for, but then also two, find evidence that they're good at that position, whatever it is. And so what I would say is, man, if you were on a YouTube channel, you could have, instead of like, I'm guessing the videos on Huddle, I don't know, but I'm guessing because he plays football, pretty common. And so I'm like, man, if you had a YouTube channel, you could split up those videos based on position and showcase each individual one. And you could do that with, individual videos. You could have highlight videos on there. There's a lot that you could do that with. And I think that there's probably just a mismatch of the positions that you play and the evidence that you're showing. And that's going to make it much harder for a coach to recruit you. And friction is one of the most important things to reduce when trying to get recruited. You want to make it as easy as possible for coaches to recruit you. And at least from what you're giving me here, I don't think you're doing that. I think you're making it pretty challenging. The other thing that I will say is you've contacted 40 schools and you've heard back from 5, right? Or you have back and forth with 5. Theoretically, if you simply doubled the number of schools that you contacted, instead of 40, you contacted 80, theoretically, you would have twice as many responses, right? And instead of talking to 5 schools, it would be 10 schools. And so just something to think about there. But your main question, are we too late in the process? You're not too late in the process. Just remember, it's not, are you too late? It's how late are you? I'd say that D1 or D2 might be a little bit of a stretch at this point, but there are still opportunities there. I know that from a fact with some of the families that we're working with. There are still opportunities there, but it's definitely going to be harder than if it was 6 or 12 months ago. Harry, I wish you the best of luck, man. All right, Jen. So 2026 women's lacrosse midfield and defense. She's had back and forth with 5 schools, all D3. That seems to be a trend today. They've contacted 30 schools. They have 10 videos, no more than 2 minutes and 30 seconds long. They're on IWLCA, which is essentially like a lacrosse recruiting site. Their goal is high academic D3 or low D1. And so the question is, how often should we be reaching out to a school she's really interested in, but not getting traction? Even if the response is, we don't want you, we'd like to know. She's a good player who, until recently, lacked the confidence to try out for elite teams, right? When she did try out for the national team, she made it. So we feel like we're behind the 8 ball. So a couple things that I noticed when I see this. The first is that they've only contacted 30 schools. And my guess is that's because they're I'll just say they seem picky, right? When you see high academic D3. And so they probably have a very small number of D3s and D1s that they are very, very interested in. Now, here's what I will say about this. 2 things. One is that it's a small window, and the smaller your window, the less likely you are to succeed. Actually, I have 3 things. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you can go contact more schools than 30, then you can use other schools that you've contacted to hopefully get those 30 schools interested, or some of them, right? And that's leverage. It's validation. If a coach sees that you're talking to 10 schools, that is more appealing than someone who isn't talking to any schools. Because if you were a good player, wouldn't you be talking to more schools? That's how coaches think. And so that's the second thing. And then the third thing is, there are probably schools that you don't know about that would actually be a great fit for your kid, even if you're thinking high academic D3 or low D1. I know from women's lacrosse, you could probably get to 50, maybe even more than that, right? And so if I'm you, I would probably go contact 30 schools, even if you're contacting schools that are not at the top of her list. I would still do that. I still think it's worth your time. I've seen this work countless times, over and over again. And so that's the first thing I see and what I would do. The second thing is, I see 10 videos, and you say none of them are longer than 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I would like them to be way shorter than that. It's okay to have longer highlight videos, as we saw with some of the families just before this. But in those cases, they also had, like the first one, I think of Shauna, she also had shorter clips as well. And I think that that is really important. You want more than just those 10 for a couple reasons. One, you need to showcase every skill that your kid that a coach wants to evaluate for your kid's position, right? You need to showcase every one of those skills. It's going to be easier to show that across short clips than burying all of those skills in a longer highlight video. So that's the first thing that I think about when those videos. The other thing is, you're going to run out of follow-up ammunition really quickly. So your main question here is, how often should we be reaching out to a school she's really interested in? If you only have 10 videos, it doesn't even really matter what my answer is. You're probably going to run out of video, right? You're probably not even going to have enough ammo to be able to do that. And so before I even answer that question of like, how should you be reaching out to those schools and what does that cadence look like and the frequency, I need you to add more video. Like I need to take those video I need you to take those videos and cut them up. Otherwise, we're not going to have any follow-up. You're going to run out of video. And so I would shrink those videos down. You say they're on IWLCA, totally fine. Like coaches recruit on IWLCA, but personally, I would prefer that they're on YouTube, right? Because then we can categorize them by skills. We can do a lot of stuff and make it really easy for coaches to see the value in the player, and also that'll help with the follow-ups. This is one thing. Following up with schools, a lot of times the efficacy of that, how well that works, is usually based on the video. It is not based on how often you do it or the words that you write in those follow-ups. It's based on the video. And so I think before you even start reaching out to those schools, we need to fix the video situation. I haven't seen your video, so I don't even know what it looks like, right? But just based on what you're telling me here, I think we need more video. We need shorter clips. We need to organize those nicely. And that's going to put us in a really good position to follow up with schools. A lot of people miss this. They think about video just in terms of getting interest from schools, but that's only part of the equation. Because once you get interest, that's great, but you still have to turn that interest into an offer. And so you can't have a short-term view of video. You need a long-term view of video. You need to build a video foundation that allows you to build relationships with coaches for many, many months. Now, let's address your question precisely, okay, and directly. How often should you be reaching out to a school she's really interested in, but not getting traction? I will tell you what we do. What we do is we send 3 emails in about a 2 to 3 week period. Okay. Now, if they don't respond in that time period, they're just not interested right now. They're either not recruiting your kid's position in grad class, or they're not recruiting right now, or they don't think your kid is good enough. Right. But we send 3 to make sure that they see at least 1 in that time period. Now, if a school doesn't respond, it doesn't mean that we never contact them again, but we need to wait a period of time for something to change. I'll give you an example. In my recruiting process, in January, I contacted Michigan. Michigan did not respond to that email. But over the course of 4 months, right, I kind of let that go. I did not contact them, but 4 or 5 months later, I contacted the same coach, a very similar email, and I got a response, right? And I ended up getting on the phone with that coach. And what he told me is he said, listen, I got your email in January, but we had a sophomore that we were very excited about. He was going to be our guy. And so we didn't need your position in grad class. But what happened is that player ended up really struggling. And turns out he's not our guy. We're moving him to a different position. And all of a sudden, we do need your position in grad class. What was the thing that changed? Their situation. If I had contacted them in January and then February again, I still would not have gotten a response because it wasn't enough time for their situation to change. The more time in between those reach outs or those follow ups, the more likely it is that their position will change. And so, how much is that time in between? It really depends on how early or late you are in the process and what other interests you have. There are a lot of factors there. Typically, I'd say it's at least 3 months. That's usually what I would say. At least 3 months. The longer in between, the more likely their situation is to change. And so what I would say is I would reach out to those schools multiple times. But again, it's going to require a lot of video. And so I would really fix the video before you do anything else, because that is going to give you the ammo to be able to hopefully get traction with these schools that haven't really given you the time of day yet. Right. And especially because she's like a late bloomer, right? She was still building the confidence. You feel like you're behind the 8 ball, but now she's like on big teams and stuff. You just need more coaches to know who she is. And so I think contact more schools than just the 30. Even if you're only interested in the 30, I get it. I would still contact more schools. I would fix the video, and then I would use that cadence that I talked about. So Jen, I wish you guys the best of luck. Last one here is Nick, 2026 baseball, left-hand pitcher, first base and outfield. He's 6'4", 180, so pretty good-sized kid. Back and forth with 7 schools, D1, D3, NAIA, and junior college. They've contacted 2 schools, right, which we're going to talk about in a second. That's pretty interesting. They have hundreds of videos, 1 freshman summary at 2 minutes, otherwise short clips on Sports Recruits and YouTube. Their goal is the best opportunity for playing time and best academic fit, and they would like to stay two-way if possible. school. So the question is, given everything that's going on with rosters and even more so my son's potential to add velo, 85 currently, and more exit velo, 98, with more size, would it be smart to hold off on committing until senior year? JUCO to 4-year and mid-major or high D2 right off the bat feel like the best options right now. So here's what I see in the situation, okay? The first thing is that there's still 2026. So his kid at the time is a junior, right? And so they still have a little bit of time. And that's why I'm guessing that Nick is feeling like, okay, we either have a couple offers or we're getting close to getting offers. Should we wait until senior year when maybe he's grown a little bit and his numbers improve? Because maybe we could get bigger offers from like D1 schools. Or should we, or is that not going to happen? That's unrealistic. We should take the opportunities we have now because we don't want to lose them, right? Now, they have back and forth with 7 schools, but they've only contacted 2 schools, which tells me that they're probably relying mostly on showcases, camps, their coach, connecting them with schools. That's primarily what they are looking at, okay, and using as a method of exposure. Otherwise, how are you getting 7 schools, only contacting 2 of them? So also, let's mention the video piece. So they have hundreds of videos. Lots of them are short clips on Sports Recruits on YouTube. I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that both of those are loaded, right? So if you have 100 videos, they should be on Sports Recruits and 100 videos on YouTube. Like, I want as much video on both of those platforms as possible because it's unlikely that coaches are going to go to both. They're probably going to go to one or the other. And so I want to make sure that you have enough video on each of those, okay? So the question that you ask here is, like, hey, my kid's velo is 85, but if we wait a year, he might be at 90, right? Or like his exit velo is 98. If we wait a year, it might be 105. And that would put him in a completely different league of type of school that he could be connecting with or committing to, right? And so would it be smart to hold off on committing until senior year? Here's the thing. There is not a black and white yes or no answer. The question that I would ask you is, what are you willing to lose, right? What consequences are you willing to live with? And so here's what that means. This is the best question that can put things into context and really get to the root of what it is that you're trying to do and what you care about. Because there's no, like I said, there's no black and white answer here. So for the 85, right, you're sitting here going, my kid's 85, he might be 90 pretty soon. But when you're saying, what am I willing to lose? Right? What are the consequences that I'm willing to live with? And so the question is, are you willing to potentially not commit now, think that you're going to get D1 opportunities senior year, and those not happen, but you're glad that you at least gave it the chance to go D1, and maybe you don't have as much interest now because you waited and a lot of spots got filled? Or would you rather, and the consequence you're willing to live with is you might settle, right? You might not go D1, even though he might be able to do that in a year, but it's a safer pick because you're just committing early and you're done with the process and you're not risking anything, right? There's no right or wrong. It depends on your appetite for risk and your kid's appetite for risk. And so you just have to be willing to say, what are the consequences that I'm willing to live with? And if you're willing to live with the consequences that you wait a year and a lot of spots go and he still doesn't get D1 and he goes to a school that he's really not that excited about, but at least you gave it a D1 shot, or would you rather take a pretty good safe option early on and forget about the D1 or whatever it is that you're shooting for at the top, right? That's what I would think about if I were you. Now, is it possible that in a year he will be in a very different spot and can commit to a D1? Absolutely. Okay. We have 2025s who right now are seniors who are committing to D1 schools. Absolutely, you can. But note, there will be less opportunities at that point than there are right now. Now, he's a good sized kid. I don't think it's unrealistic that he could go from 85 to 90 in a year. I just don't. Now, if you came in saying my kid is 5'8" and he's throwing 78 and I think he'll be throwing 90 in a year, I'd say, no, that's wrong. Okay. But where you're at right now and the size of your kid, I think it's entirely possible that he could be a very different player in a year. And so, again, if I were you, I would be thinking about what are the consequences that I'm willing to live with. And if you can live with, hey, you know what, we might have to go to a junior college out of high school because we waited for a D1 and it didn't happen, but at least I knew that I gave it a D1 shot, then that's what I would do if I were you. And if you can't do that, and if that just feels way too risky, then take a great school now, early on, And if you need to transfer once you're there, then you can transfer once you're there. But if I'm you, also, let's say I would go contact way more schools because it's entirely possible that you could get D1 interest right now. Do I think you're going to get Power Four interest? Probably not, not at 85, even with his size. But I would still go contact a whole lot of schools because there's likely a lot of juice in the tank. If you have 7 schools from showcases, camps, and coach connections, which are not really great at producing mass exposure, you could very easily 3x the number of schools that you're talking to right now just from going and contacting more schools. And so I would absolutely do that if I were you. And I would be thinking about what consequences am I willing to live with? So, Nick, I wish you the best of luck. Hopefully, you found this helpful walking through these. If you're the parent of a high school athlete and you are struggling in the process and you want help, you can click the link in the description to book a call with us. We can walk you through what we do and how we help. Otherwise, I will see you guys next time.